By April next year, I'm gonna have a fully painted 2,000 point army of Soul Blight Gravelords because I'm involved in an escalation league called Conquerors. An escalation league is a group of gamers who are slowly increasing the point totals of their army month after month and adding newly painted additions each time. A time comes in every vampire's life when they have to raise some skeletons into unlife. Because I'm not actually a vampire, sadly.
You understand that I'm working, right, Scott?
Oh, serious. I think I make a pretty good vampire. Hey, what's up?
I like your outfit.
Thank you. It's a little bit hard to go to the bathroom, though.
My version of necromancy today will be painting. Let's kick it off. You may think that a video about painting skeletons is trivial. It's just a bunch of bones. Prime it white, wash it and save it from sepia. Easy peasy, please. Do you think anything is ever that simple for me? Colors and brushes instead. Joking aside, Games Workshop's newly minted Death Rattle, is that actually their name? That is so extra. Hey Mitch, we got those new, Emperor Almighty.
You saw nothing. Nothing.
What are you, a fucking Jedi?
What do you want, Stu?
We got that new skeleton kit finished up.
Ah, okay, and we need to name it. What's on the table so far?
Skeleton Warriors is the best thing we've got so far. It's missing a certain, ability to enforce IP infringement law.
Yes.
Ivory Warriors of the Howling Plains.
More words.
Excommunicated Ivory Warriors of the Howling Plains.
Yes. Yes. More.
Okay, stay with me on this one, but excommunicated Ivory Warriors of the dusty and very windy Howling Plains.
Yeah.
The new skeletons are largely not bone and instead have lots of armor and flowing cloth, which was an opportunity for me to have fun crafting a nice paint scheme. I'm gonna shoot for a paint up that's around 30 to 40 minutes a model or less, but still looks nice to me and my standards. All right, enough messing about. Let's paint some boner boys! This process started with Halgrim. He's my North Star skeleton. I did a lot of testing with him to see what colors I liked and where I wanted them to go. This model took a while to paint, but my future skeletons will only use this model as inspiration.
Father?
Look over there, boner girls.
What?
Jesus
What?
Christ,
Where?
keep running into
I
these
don't
boner
see
children.
I'm looking at a cold steel, a rich red fabric, some desaturated gold metallic elements, a spectrally green and blue bone color, and a generic brown for belts, spear shafts, and more. All right, what did my actual skeleton scheme end up looking like after several iterations and time-saving tricks? I'm gonna begin with a base coat of deep blue. And you'll notice that I'm not actually priming the model. This is largely a test to see if priming is useful for gaming miniatures. Based on Goopertown Hobby's research into the subject, video link below, priming on plastic models especially seems like a large waste of time. I'm not telling you to skip it, just that I'm playing around with this time-saving idea. For posterity, I washed this model in soap and water before applying paint for maximum paint adhesion for this test. I'm gonna highlight all the cloth elements with Chimera's The Red, a beautifully saturated red paint. All the paints I use will be linked in the description below, and those links are affiliate links. Any purchases gives me a little extra cash and no extra cost to you. I actually have a coupon code for 5% off Chimera products down in the description if you're interested. I'm targeting exclusively the cloth elements, but a little overspray really isn't that big of a deal. This gets me a very nice red to blue transition on the fabric with next to no time, only using 2 colors, no intermediate tones. You're shooting for fully opaque red on the shoulders, and as it comes down toward the bottom of the miniature, more of a translucent layer. This draws the eyes out to the top of the model, where we'll be largely focusing our efforts. Next, I'll airbrush the bones with Vallejo Ice Yellow. The yellow on top of the blue allows for that green to occur in the midtone even when we're not mixing paint. The speckles of paint the airbrush produce are so microscopic that when viewed from distances greater than 6 to 12 inches, they blur together and form a blend. I'm trying to not ace the red cloth, but sometimes you might, and that's okay. This scheme has steps in the future to counteract any kind of overspray like this. Alternatively, you can grab a very small piece of cardstock to help with situations like this where a large amount of overspray is inevitable, but I find myself not doing that too often. For the helmetless heads, I did create a very simple mask of a piece of cardstock with a hole cut into it. This area is a higher liability area for overspray, and this is such a simple way to mask. Alright, before moving on to the next step, let's hear a brief word from our sponsor. Comet Lord Miniatures is a Canadian-based model designer that releases STLs every single month on their Patreon for you to print up and paint. For a fee of $10, you get access to a slew of great models. In December, we're getting the evil Ulrich Kresnik, his Eisenrich soldiers, and a transformed version of Kresnik in the Apotheosis of Man. A biblically accurate angel which might sound pleasant at first, but is far from it. There are versions with wings and tentacles. Comet Lord also came out with Margot, the Orphan of Set, an absolutely gigantic miniature that can be used as a tree topper this holiday season if you're looking to terrify your relatives. I'll take 83 of them, please. I'm coming for you, Uncle Steve. If you'd rather pick up the STLs individually, pick from their catalog of over 150 different models on their My Mini Factory web store. Comet Lord Miniatures is also offering the Mini family 50% off their STLs with the coupon code PAINTMOREMINIs. That is the biggest discount code a company has ever given me for a sponsor. True story. Lastly, they're running a painting challenge from December until February. The rules for the competition will be available freely on their Patreon. Links for where to find Comet Lord are available in the description below. Now back to the video. Next, I paint all the metallic elements, which cleans up a lot of the overspray. This step is by far the longest, especially on a model like this one that has more armor than some of the other Skelly boys and girls. If you had a lot of overspray on various parts, you could slap on a layer of deep blue. The only thing that really matters is that the recesses are dark blue, so don't fret if you still see a little red or white on the tops of scales or armor, for instance. The main armor is silver, and the scale mail and anything decorative is gold. With this stuff, I'm trying to preserve that original deep blue in the deepest spots. I'm not being too finicky with details like rivets and whatnot, but some of these deeper pockmarks and recesses are easy to leave behind. Now you can see why we only cared about the deepest parts of the model when reapplying that Scale 75 deep blue. No sense in needlessly base coating something that won't be seen in the end. This approach also produces a better level of definition than any wash could ever hope to do, and I get it in 2 steps. An airbrush base coat followed by a selective base coat. If you're struggling with something that's smaller and more detailed, an overbrush, which is basically a dry brush with more paint in the bristles, is great for picking out those details without spending too much time. For the shields, a simple dry brush of that same gold will do just fine. This highly textured shield looks great with this simple step, and it saves a lot of time. You'll notice that I'm masking with some poster tack, and it's only because for some reason the Cursed City versions of these skeletons hold their shields super closely to their cloth. When painting the normal skeletons you buy separately, there's enough distance there for me to have no concern about getting gold flecks everywhere, but your mileage may vary. It's worth mentioning that I painted the edge of the shield with a normal base coat of gold so I could avoid dry brushing on that part, likely I'm making even more of a mess. The gold step illustrates an interesting idea in this painting process that is kind of unique compared to conventional batch painting wisdom. I could paint every single part of the gold on this model in the same way. In a paint plan, this step might read as layer on Necro gold, preserving the undercoat in the deepest parts. But that would take forever. By employing dry brushing and overbrushing and layering selectively, I'm able to save time capturing 80% of the outcome by using 3 different application methods in one step. Not particularly difficult to do that, but it makes so much sense to spend your time wisely instead of brainlessly applying the same step to every part of the model when it makes more sense to treat individual parts uniquely. Next up, an intermediate airbrush step. With some Vallejo Express blue, I add some interesting shadows to the torso armor. Mix some retarder into this paint because otherwise it causes dry tip pretty quickly on the airbrush. I love this step. The main armor is looking a little boring and I think it's a focal point, so it needs some extra zhuzh. With a quick spritz of blue, it enlivens it so much. Overspray is not really an issue either because blue is a main shadow color in my scheme, and if I get some on the bone or the red cloth, it just ends up looking like more shadow. You can even clean up some of the white overspray with this color if you want to. In my world, it would take way too long to achieve this effect with a brush, but with an airbrush, it's super fast. I tend to only apply the shading to the torso, but you can certainly hit other armor plates as well. It all depends on how much time you want to spend. If you're noticing that some of your recessed lines aren't visible enough at this stage, like around the rivets, you can strengthen them with more of that Vallejo Express blue color, but this shouldn't take you too long. I also apply a wash of Drakenhof Nightshade to only the bone while I'm doing this to bring out some definition in those parts. You might wonder why I'm using similar products for what seem like similar steps, but for recessed shading, what I want is opacity, and a wash like Drakenhof Nightshade has really none of that, unless it builds up really deeply in a recess. So with Vallejo Express Blue, I can do that in one swipe, not needing to do multiple passes. By the way, if you're curious about our progress in the Escalation League so far, we're currently at our second 750-point game. Tune in on Thursdays at 7 p.m. CST to see these games, and 1 p.m. CST on Tuesdays to catch the painting streams. If you can't catch the streams, you can find them on my VOD channel, Miniac's Backlog. I'll put a link to the playlist of all of the Northern Conquerors games captured on the stream so far in the video right now and in the description below. Alright, back to painting my likeness. Next up, I apply a brighter silver highlight to the edges of the armor and also toward the top of the torso. To blend it in with some of that darker silver, I do some real rough stippling between the two. Not much is needed to hide that transition, and stippling gives us a nice bit of texture. I don't really touch much of the metal toward the bottom of the model for this step. I then create 2 to 3 mixtures of off-white paint on my palette using Pure White, Vallejo Ice Yellow, and Vallejo Express Blue. Depending on what part of the bone I'm painting on the model, I'll apply one of these as a single highlight. I'm not applying multiple highlights, but if I'm painting the head, I'll use the brighter mixture. If I'm painting a forearm or a hand, I'll use kind of a mid-tone mixture. And if I'm painting like the leg or something lower on the model, I'll use a darker mixture, so on and so forth. Lastly, I highlight the red cloth with more of Chimera's The Red. This allows me to clean up a lot of mistakes I made with the airbrush and past colors and enliven parts of the cloth with a punchy, saturated red. I use a more diluted mixture of the paint when doing this to better blend it with my airbrush layers. Again, I'm targeting details mostly on the front of the model and higher up. Grabbing the edges of this wispy cloth with a bright red edge highlight makes the fabric pop so much. Oh wait, one last step. I paint all the spear shafts and belts with a transparent brown product. I use one from Army Painter, but you can use whatever you want. I don't worry about cleaning up the base coat when applying this speed paint because I find that a nice varied undercoat creates for a nice, interesting, diverse leather and wood effect. Also, if your skeleton is showing off the back of his shield in a big way, often just paint that entirely black and grab some of the edges with a bit more gold. Alright, now they can be done. In under 45 minutes, I get a skeleton that I am truly happy with in terms of time expenditure and outcome. My OG test model in Halgrim probably took me around 12 to 15 hours, and this model only took a fraction of that time. I like a scheme like this so much because it has a learning curve. The better I get at it, the faster it'll be. Obviously this is true of all painting, but I think it's more so true in this case. You can also spend more time on certain steps or less, depending on what kind of figure you're painting, and that will also change the amount of time you spend. I probably spent a bit longer on this skeleton because I wanted it to look nice for YouTube. That's gonna do it for this video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. This was a bit of a unique video to the Miniac channel. Whenever I'm painting like a singular model, I often kind of just wing it and film that first painting process on camera. But for these models, I painted a lot of skeletons, doing a lot of different experiments, trying to figure out what worked well for me. If you have a question about any part of this painting process, please ask down below. I likely have a very specific reason why I am doing something. And if I don't, maybe you'll find a better way for me to paint a certain part of the model. If you like the channel and you want to support it, there are many ways to do so, namely a Patreon campaign with a bunch of fun rewards, like a Discord server where you and I can hang out any day of the week and chat about your miniature painting projects, or how to trim literal seconds off your paint plans, like a nerd. You can also buy hobby gear that I recommend, linked down in the description below with my affiliate links. You can buy my model, the Duchess, and also a digital course that goes along with her, teaching you how to paint the model step by step. Subscribe or die! And most importantly, don't forget to paint more minis!